So recently, my friend, kind of statement came back to me, and I was just kind of mulling it over. So I kind of wanted to repeat it back to you. And it's actually basically how to Dale Carnegie referencing it in how to win friends and influence people. And it's actually how Albert Hubbard would kind of reply to people who disagreed with him or try to talk, try to argue with him in light letters and so forth. And it's just really interesting to me. And it goes like this. Come to think it over, I don't entirely agree with it myself. Not everything I wrote yesterday appeals to me today. I am glad to learn what you think on the subject. The next time you are in the neighborhood, you must visit us, and we will get this subject freshed out for all time. So here's a hand clasp across the miles, and I am yours sincerely. It's just, I really wanted to just repeat it because who talks like this? I mean, seriously, looking at distant discourse today, when was the last time you saw someone who has actually like, you know what, I'm thinking about things differently. How about let's meet in person and talk things over? Who does that? Again, that's actually getting face to face with someone and talking over, which is probably one of the best ways to actually settle differences because again, you're seeing the body language, you're seeing the expressions, you're actually having this dialogue, you're actually seeing the person for who they are rather than just this nameless person that you can project things onto, even though people will project things on almost anyone these days. But again, it's just something that is very interesting and very different from what seems to be our average discourse these days. And I think that brings up kind of the difference between reality versus stories on a changed mind. And that's really what I want to talk about today. Because in reality, people seem to believe that anyone who disagrees with them are set in their ways. They aren't committed to growth. They aren't reading. They aren't as learned. They aren't committed to growth, or they aren't committed to all the good things as they are. And part of that is that when they've tried to make someone change, it's failed. And why is that? How do you make someone change? The truth is that you can't. It's their choice on whether to change or not. And oftentimes, by trying to force change, especially how most people do it, like presenting their arguments with all these facts and details or emotional pleas or whatever, it's like most people have a reason for believing the way they do or thinking things the way they do. And when you try to basically go, you're wrong and this is why, it's like, doesn't work for people. It doesn't, it only makes them want to double down in a sense. And the thing is, with growth and change, is that not everyone is willing. Not people. Oftentimes, people can be either really, really ready to change and knowing that it takes growth and so forth. And sometimes people may be willing to grow, but they may not be growing in the way you want them to. But the thing is that not everyone is willing to grow and change. And I think the first kind of step, once we know that, is to examine ourselves and think, am I willing to grow? Am I willing to change? Am I willing to rethink the way I do things, and so forth. Because then it's like, how are you going to lead someone else to change if you aren't willing to change yourself? Because then sometimes it is in that dialogue where you actually find out that there's a third choice here. There's a way to actually fresh out something that both of you hadn't expected because you had such different perspectives. But once you find out where your perspectives are, you see things in a whole new light. You see that there was actually a whole different world that you hadn't seen before. So it's just something to really think about. Yet the funny thing about stagnant reality, in a sense, is that in stories, the most memorable characters are the ones who actually change, especially in regards to mindset. That's the change in mind I wanted to talk about, versus them just training and getting stronger and better. I mean, again, there's kind of a wish fulfillment there, and there's also wish fulfillment in finding out that the power was inside just all along. You just had to believe in yourself. But yet, it's the mindset change that really sticks with people. And this is especially true with the redemption art. And again, that's the thing, we want to talk about arts with characters. Because redemption art is basically a complete perspective shift almost. It's not basically like, oh, the villain just suddenly switched sides, but they're the same kind of, they have all the same traits and so forth. They're just fighting with us now. And now within there can be places for stories like that where the villain is actually fighting a bitter villain or so on and so forth. But yet, what's the point of having this redemption arc if the mindset is completely the same, if they haven't gone through any change? And that kind of brings up the dynamic versus static characters, in that both have their place and both can have stories written about them. And again, sometimes a static character can be very good for long-running stories where it's mostly about the plot and how they basically have the plot happen to them. Yet, for a character to truly stand out, it is often the dynamic experience that they go through, that change that happens, that just makes for a more memorable and better protagonist, at least in my mind. Yet the thing is that many people want kind of that, oh, the adventure happens to me, or all the good things happen to me, just like the MC. But yet they want to have that remaining stat. They don't actually want to go through the process of changing. They don't want to have the active role in the story. They want to have it almost happen to them. So just something to note about how people seem to operate, at least to me. Because oftentimes it's the willingness to admit that we were wrong that leads to change. And then it's actually being willing to admit that we were wrong about something that actually means that someone else might start to see things in a different way. Because then it takes humility to do that. It takes laying down of pride, laying down of arrogance to admit that I may be wrong about this. It's not just something to basically, it's basically also compassion in a sense, to be willing to listen. It's empathy, humility, all those kinds of things to basically go like, I want to know how you think because I may be wrong about this. And you have a perspective that I want to know about. So it's just something that is very different. But yet, not all change is good. And then, sometimes we can think about that, and that people may be changing, but they may not be changing the way I do, and that can be good or bad. But then, the thing is that there are some things that should endure, and some things that we probably shouldn't do in a sense, and all those kinds of things. And we can think of what endures, what makes a character themselves, like what core traits do they have that should last throughout the character arc, or what makes someone themselves, what is truly core to their being, and in a way, what endures beyond us, what principles last and have just kept going throughout all history. So it's just something to really think and ask about, I guess, or to really just ponder. But anyway, those are my thoughts on it. Why not share yours in the comments below? And if you enjoyed this video, you can like and share it so others may enjoy as well. Anyway, I'm Jonah, and you've been watching Lions Mane Media, where we celebrate stories and the lessons we learn from them. Thank you for listening to my musings. Talk to you later, and have a great rest of your day.